The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
THORChain mainnet is live on 7 blockchain networks after nearly 4 years of development, allowing users to trade Bitcoin for any other supported asset, including ETH, BNB, and Doge, without the use of bridges or wrapped assets. Joining us to break this down is Chad Barraford, technical lead at THORChain.
Hi, Chad. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
Great, good to have you. All right, well, let's just sort of get right into this. As we've been talking about this whole show, this is just not a great moment for crypto. It's kind of a bold time to be sort of, launching a product, even one that you've been working on for many years. So I guess the question is what is the sort of argument you would make to the bystander here for why this is necessary, why Thor is necessary, when sort of crypto is kind of imploding? What is the value that you are bringing here?
Well, so part of the ethos of this entire industry is being self-sovereign and having peer-to-peer transactions. And it's almost comical that we still rely on exchanges like Binance and Coinbase and all these things to be able to transact and move between blockchain A to blockchain B. And to do that in a completely decentralized way that is permissionless and such as resistant is quite in line with the ethos of how we think about this industry. It's something we desperately need. There's nobody in the industry that would argue with me on this point, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can go on to explain to our viewers who've never heard of THORChain what THORChain is and how it works.
Yeah, so THORChain is like an AMM, or automated market maker, and it allows people to move their assets from one blockchain to another. So, for example, Bitcoin to Ethereum. You don't need to sign up. There's no KYC. There's no process that you have to go through other than just making a trade. If you want to make a trade from Bitcoin to Ethereum, the only actual requirement is just to sign a Bitcoin transaction. You don't need to buy anything else. You don't need to acquire anything else. Just sign a Bitcoin transaction and you can acquire ETH or Tether or, one day, very soon, Atom's coming out very soon, AVAX coming out soon, BNB, all sorts of different assets, all sorts of different chains.
Mm-hmm. What about the security? Because last July, CoinDesk reported that THORChain suffered from an $8 million hack last year and was also drained of 4,000 ETH just weeks apart. So I wonder what kind of lessons were learned from the testnet.
Yeah, so that was a big moment for us, for sure. We launched it in a public beta, and we knew that what we were building was one of the most difficult and ambitious projects in the space. And we had to be much more cautious and responsible about how we launched this thing. And so we launched it in a public beta for a lot of people to test and start playing around with it in the earliest days of the development. And that's when we kind of reached most of our bugs or issues in those very early days of the public beta. And since then, we've done all sorts of things to kind of improve security. We've actually made the network to defend itself from attacks dynamically on its own, which we actually saw that happen with Terra recently. When Terra started to fail, the network actually defended itself from certain attack vectors. We went through developing a THORSec team, or a dedicated security team, to have a 24-hour kind of mentality of auditing all code changes continuously. We've made all sorts of things like bug bounties was part of the process as well. We made a lot of lessons learned from that process, and we've become very stronger since then.
Are you confident that you've improved enough to avoid these exploits? Because I'm just looking at the top exploits of all time, and they're all interoperability exploits according to the Rect database. Ronin, $615 million stolen. Poly Network, $600 million as well. Wormhole, 326 there, ETH to Solana bridge. So how is Thor safer?
Well, that's a great question to ask. So those things you mentioned are bridges. This is not a bridge. This is not taking one asset and then wrapping on another blockchain and then coming with all that security risk that comes with that. Vitalik has talked about how cross-chain wrapped assets is inherently problematic and how multi-chain is actually the way to go. And THORChain is really the only in the leading method of actually moving a cross-chain in a multi-chain perspective.
So let's step back here and think about what happens over the next 5-10 years. You're right now focused on digital assets and moving those across chains. But how do you see it pertaining to assets that are, let's say, not digital, but are essentially wrapped versions of securities, let's say? Do you see a future in that, or do you think that primarily you just want to focus here on the digital side, digital assets?
That's a good question. So it's up to the community how they want to move it going forward. the network itself is agnostic to chain, is agnostic to asset. So it could support pretty much any chain or asset, any digital asset or digital chain in the world. Layer 1s, layer 2s, I mean, pretty much anything you can think of. But it's up to the community to decide what chains they want to support, what assets they want to support, and it's not up to me or anybody else.
And wasn't the TerraLuna platform one of the things that they wanted to support? Was that how that was involved there? So what was the thinking behind it at that point, and what's the view now? I mean, obviously the enthusiasm's probably not there as it was.
Well, there was certainly a lot of enthusiasm at the time. It was the most in-demand chain to add out of the entire community by a good margin. And the launch of that chain was highly successful in many ways. It was almost $100 million to add to the network in TVL within a week or so. So it was a very good addition to the network. Unfortunately, the TerraChain, had an epic kind of collapse to it. But that, in a sense, was not problematic to THORChain itself. In fact, THORChain was actually able to, because it was able to protect itself from certain forms of attack, it was actually to save people's funds, and so we wouldn't lose as much money in this case.